She holds a PhD in the area of violence, gender and caste from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. The area of her study is gender and intersectionalities with particular emphasis on the issues of Dalit women. She is currently teaching and guiding in the School of Gender Studies at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad. She teaches intersectionality, sexuality, cinema, media, and women's writing for the postgraduate students. She has published papers in various national and international journals on gender, caste, cinema, and media. Her recent paper, Casting Queer Identities, published in NUGS Law Review Journal, is a critique on how caste operates in the queer intimate spaces.
Asked me to speak on literature and gender. I was actually thinking, why such an obsolete theme? Okay, the reason being, like, recently I submitted some of my short stories to a publishing house, and the publishing house said that nowadays youth don't read any literature. Okay, so there is no circulation. COVID-19 pandemic has hit it even more badly. Okay, so now people are into media. Okay, a lot of cinema, watching a lot of other things. So it has become the youth. I mean, I'm not like criticizing the youth or anything, because every generation has its own, newer trends, and they are welcome, and sometimes they are not welcome. They are also short-lived and all that. Okay, sometimes short-lived and long-living. Okay, so that we have become so. I also call myself with you that, we have become so, restless, that the shortest thing that we watch is the shorts. The shortest possible way of narrating a story, right? But then, I also thought about, when ma'am asked me to talk about literature and gender, it has given me a very interesting and a fascinating, a chance to ponder upon, how I landed up here through literature. Okay, so literature and language, they are inseparable. As ma'am already spoke about how language is always gendered, and that gendered nature is patriarchy, or sometimes it's Brahminical patriarchy. Okay, so to look at literature, I guess some of the students here must be English literature students. I don't know whether that kind of a classical way of teaching English literature is there or not in this college. But in literature, the moment you think about literature, you are reminded of Shakespeare, right? And also English literature, as as a student, when we were introduced to English literature begins with which text? Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Is it even possible that Chaucer could be the first one to ever write anything in English? No. So there is a canonical way of, English literature departments were meant to exclude and include certain works. So therefore, in the 16th century, or in the Romantics, in the period of metaphysical poets, you don't often see women writers. Women writers you only see towards, 19th century onwards. Right? So, and why such exclusion has taken place is what Terry Eagleton brilliantly, delves upon. I'm not going to delve more deep into that. And also how women writing begins is Ellen Showalter also very fascinatingly deals with. Okay, so to just go back to language and literature, I'm just looking at Shakespeare. So often, Shakespeare always, not just often, but always is praised for the poetic genius, right? So no doubt about it, and we are no one to, at least I am no one to qualify or disqualify Shakespeare, but when I look at the language, you so fall in love with the language, the poetic nature, poetic genius of the language. Okay, so some of the quotes that are there forever on your mind. Okay, this could be from Hamlet, Measure for Measure, some of his classical works. Okay, so one of the quotes I just remember is from Measure for Measure. And another one from As You Like It. In Measure for Measure, Shakespeare said, "Never could an immodest woman once stir my temper. How come this virtuous woman subdues me quite?" Okay, so he's asking a question that, never could an immodest, sexually impure women also never attracted me. How come this woman, being so sexually pure also attracted me or tempted me and stirred my temper? And another one is from As You Like It, where Shakespeare says that beauty provoketh thieves sooner than gold. Okay, so it is the women's beauty that provokes men. Okay, so this is the patriarchy that is implicit in the language and henceforth also in the literature. Okay, and this is also the period where men sit together, not literally, metaphorically, and write about women and women's beauty, women's character, women's sexual purity. And today, we have moved so far from 16th century. I have nothing to do with Shakespeare, but our ministers are saying this thing. That you wear jeans and you attract men, therefore there is rape. Okay, you are immodest, you have changed 3 to 4 boyfriends, then you are immodest and you are sexually impure, so therefore you attract rape. Not just men, but men in terms of consensual sex, but also in terms of rape. Okay, as also I go back to what Sunita ma'am was pointing out, the identities also are implicit in building one's sexual purity, particularly in Indian context. Okay, so one is that rape is one thing that bothers everyone. Okay, and rape, without quoting any numbers and data, but rape culture is that, that has to bother us more than rape. Because once in a while, there is a rape case that is reported. But Human Rights Watch is saying 6 women are raped every few minutes. Okay, 1 woman is raped every 6 minutes. That's what Human Rights Watch is saying. But we don't hear all those cases. We only hear very few cases of, say, Disha in Hyderabad, and sometime back in 2012 we heard of Nirbhaya. Right, so what is happening here is actively people are condemning rape. That's an interesting phenomenon. But also actively those same people are also constructing the rape culture. When you say that this person shouldn't get raped, so you are actually saying someone else should get raped. Okay, so that is the beauty, that is the way you need to analytically look at language. If you say a woman who is innocent, who doesn't have a boyfriend, who just went out at around 9 o'clock in the night, cannot be raped. So what you are saying is the one who went around at 12 o'clock in the night, went to pub with a boyfriend, should get raped. Right? So the language is implicit. The implicit meanings are very important over there. And when you say a middle class woman, highly educated, and working in a government sector or whatever, like educated woman, middle class woman shouldn't get raped, then you are saying there are some other women who can be raped. So, recently I was giving a training program, like, I was a resource person to the police department, and all of them are DSP level police. So I just asked them a question, in your service, okay, they are not young people, they are like, into middle ages, at least between 40 to 60 they are. So I just asked them a question that in your, service, have you ever come across a sex worker being raped? They said, how is that even possible, madam? How is that even possible? Sex worker, she's there to get raped. She's there for sex. So the idea of consent has not even penetrated into almost like, 80 people that I was speaking to in the hall, in that particular hall. Okay. So, idea of consent, a sex worker who is deprived of, doesn't have any sexual purity, and certain caste women who do not have essentially any sexual purity. And certain identities like, black women like Maya Angelou being called as slut essentially by default for being born in that, in that community. So that is the language, the power of the language, and that is how gender is represented in language. Sometimes, gender becomes so pertinent to language that, we cannot separate. So G.B. Shaw once said, happy is the man who makes a living by his hobby. So I liked this. I kind of, got so inspired by it and felt that, I'm going to teach literature so that I get to read a lot of fiction, because I love fiction. At that time, we didn't have mobile phones and all that. Okay, so literature was one that gives you both the pleasure and also at the same time a great scope to learn so many lives and complexities of lives. So, but he said, happy is the man, but I am not a man. Should I go by this or not? That was my predicament. So that is the, inseparable nature of language and literature. Okay, so without delving more on these things, like in the West, you see that early women writers like Bronte's sisters had to change their names, okay, and publish, because publishing houses said there is no demand for women writing. Women's knowledge is like, women are not knowledgeable. Women's ability to write about themes and all is not, not really kind of commendable at the publishing house itself. Because of the commercial nature of these publishing houses, these women have either changed their names as ambiguously, like, neither male nor female, or sometimes, male pseudonyms, male pen names, they could publish. Okay, and when they started publishing, you have, like, the history can be looked through the women writers who are relying on writing about their experiences. Okay, their own experiences and reflecting them in the literature. And later on, you have also Hogarth Press, that is, began by Virginia Woolf. Not only that, Virginia Woolf's success also in terms of, in terms of how she theorized androgyny, the ambiguity between the sexes, like a person shouldn't, doesn't have to be completely male or female. The idea of, gender fluidity comes from androgyny, though not, in terms of as it came so vigorously from, Foucault or Judith Butler. Okay, so but in the Indian context, what happened? In Indian context, who are the early writers? The early women writers also invariably came from the lower class and marginalized sections. So, for example, Molla, who wrote Ramayana in 16th century. 16th century, first woman's Ramayana was written by Molla, and also she was a Potter caste woman, and therefore, she was ridiculed that it is a Potter's Ramayana and all. Then she took up a challenge, and she has written now different kind of Ramayana from her blank verse which she wrote earlier. And then Muddupalani appears as one of the early writers also in women writing in India. Muddupalani, the one who wrote the most erotic epic, was written by Muddupalani, who is a courtesan of Tanjavur. Okay, who's a courtesan, so obviously not a middle class, dominant caste or Brahmin woman. Okay, and we have also women writers like Mahalakka Bai Chanda in Hyderabad context, where women were writing. So when women writing began from the marginalized sections, right? But later on, the very rhetoric of, the kind of language politics that operated in the mainstream literature has again brought back the scenario that the Brahmin men and then the Brahmin women's writings have become commendable and part of the mainstream literature. So the question is, if you ask me a question about a representation of women in literatures, okay, so I kind of surely disagree with the Sanskritization process that we already understand. But in Indian scenario, what happened was English education, for example. In the English education was invariably embraced by the dominant caste Brahmin males initially. And then English literature probably initially in the hands of Brahmin males. The departments were in the hands of Brahmin males. But later when they went into science and technological educations, so English and social sciences and humanities education now then became a women's field. Like you will see a lot of women in these fields. But at the same time, like when women entered into literature education, Kumud Pavde has written a very interesting autobiography of her story of Sanskrit. When she wrote story of Sanskrit, like also it's an interesting critique on how merit is looked at by both by the Brahmins and by Dalits. So here is a woman who is not unmeritorious. She is a gold medalist in Sanskrit language, and still she doesn't have a job. So every time she went to any interview board, okay, the interviewers were laughing at her, saying that oh, now Dalits are going to teach Sanskrit because it's a forbidden language both for women and for Dalits, and she happened to be a Dalit woman. So therefore, she was excluded not because of lack of merit, because she is meritorious, but she is a Dalit, and there is a mismatch between what she is aspiring for and what her caste position was. So therefore, she couldn't get a job, and the story is very rich. Actually, you should, if you have a chance to read, please read the story. The story was so rich that she suffered without a job after MA in Sanskrit with gold medal from a reputed institute for 2 long years. So after that, she wrote a letter to the then cabinet minister, Jagjeevan Ram, and he placed this letter before Nehru. Nehru sent 250 rupees as a award for her merit, and said, you better now engage yourself, engage in research and not, worry about a job, because you are so meritorious that you should do your PhD. Okay, so Kumud Pavde's actual name is Kumud Som Kumar. Kumud Som Kumar is an indication of Dalit identity. So therefore she didn't get a job. After 2 years, there is a story that she doesn't tell us in this part, that she happened to marry a Brahmin man. Her surname automatically changed into Kumud Pavde, and then again she applied for a position as a lecturer, and the board said, we are so surprised and shocked to know that you, with these many credentials and accomplishments, do not have a job. How come? So now it's their question back, how come you don't have a job for 2 years? What were you doing actually? So Kumud Pavde at the end very interestingly writes that, not just, even today, just remember, in India, a Dalit woman has not become a Sanskrit lecturer. It is Kumud Pavde, the Brahmin woman, newly transitioned Brahmin woman, who got a job. So the identities are, one, very much pertinent to lives, but secondly, identities are also versatile. In academics, once after the Dalit writing came, of course, Dalit women also have written their memoirs and all that, but there is this unilateral idea of that identities cannot be diverse. A person cannot have just one identity of being a black or a Dalit or a woman. Okay, you might have watched this series called Good Doctor. In Good Doctor, the person who is suffering from dyslexia happened to be white. So the administration said, let us now give chance to also dyslexic person, because we have already given chance to a woman and a black. How so clear? Black is not a woman. Woman is not a black. Okay, and the dyslexic person is white. So white woman, black man, and dyslexia of a white person. So suppose if all of them are in one person, how do you deal with it? Black woman suffering from dyslexia and some physical disability. So how do you deal with this? I think the answers are not there in rhetoric. Answers are there in only epistemological standpoints of either the black women's struggles, also the Dalit struggles, even within Dalit, the paper that I have recently published, not recently, 2 years back published, was the queer casting queer identities. So this idea to work upon began with this. Okay, so there was a person who told me that he is Dalit gay. So he is not part of Dalit movement, because Dalit movement says wait for some time, not in this birth, about sexuality. because the heterosexual male entitlement is taken care, but the other sexualities, when you want to talk about women's sexuality, or gay person's sexuality or queer person's sexuality, Dalit movement says, wait, there are much more important issues to deal with. Okay, so is there another birth? Don't we eat, drink, and also simultaneously sexuality coexists? But here the question is, wait, it doesn't. So when you go to the queer communities, community says, wait, we just started our movement and don't bring caste into it and break it further. Okay, so therefore a friend told us, a friend who is Dalit gay male, okay, cis male said, a man said that once he happened to meet a person who studied in Oxford and returned, and he asked him, what is your surname? Sometimes, unfortunately, Dalits also have upper caste surnames. Sometimes they're ambiguous, like sometimes the certain caste names are across all, and certain caste names are specific to Dalits and all. But here is a Dalit surname which is also sounds like upper caste. So this Oxford return said, oh, good that you seem to be upper caste, now we can date. When should we date? Okay, so and we live in a country where, yes, queer sexualities has a potentiality to deconstruct caste, because caste or race are how do you define race? Racially homogeneous couples reproduce their own biological children, continue the race. Similarly, the caste endogamously married couples reproduce their own biological couples, continue caste. Right? So therefore, going by this, queer sexualities have a potentiality of deconstructing caste, but not in the manner a woman, a mother who accepted the child's sexuality and the sexual orientation and announced that we are looking for an higher groom for my gay son. Okay, this cannot deconstruct. Okay, so therefore the identities are versatile. Okay, now Dalit doesn't mean that the complexities of other identities don't hit the person. The queer doesn't mean that the complexity of caste or or race will not come to exist in the coexist in the person's life. Okay, so therefore with this, though I know I did not do much justice to literature part, but but that's the saga of understanding the complexities and the diversities of identities that I could come across, with I think, with a bit of critique also in academic on academic field, where the movements are very unilateral. Okay, just Dalit group is all male group. Okay, and queer group is all upper class group. But if you see in the US, lesbian movement was started by black women. Okay, whatever the historical requirement, historical overview of that, we don't have much time to delve on that, but queer sexualities are not the issues of the upper caste, upper classes. Similarly, caste is not just the Dalits issue of Dalits and Dalit males, but these are all the issues that are concerning to the comprehensively to Indian society. If you want to see an Indian society which is brighter, progressing into, today people, you might have heard about Korea, kind of small countries are now very well developed, and people watch K-pop and K-drama and all that. Okay, so the countries that are doing better by giving education, by giving equal opportunities, by also, but for India it's not so easy, because it's rich in diversity, but that richness doesn't come by just diversity, but the way you deal with that diversity. So with this, I'll stop it here. Thank you for the opportunity.